unbelievable. Hillary Clinton's latest comments about Israel, about Palestine, about the genocide are nauseating, to be honest, and indicative of her incredible arrogance, her inhumanity, and her contempt for the lives of Palestinians. Now, she was speaking at an event organized by Israel Hayom, that's Israel's biggest circulation newspaper. It's run actually by Miriam Adelson, who's the Israeli American billionaire who is a staunch advocate of Israel, to say the least, and donor to Donald Trump. Let's just listen to what she said first.
Our students, smart, well-educated young people from our own country, from around the world, where were they getting their information? They were getting their information from social media, particularly TikTok. That is where they were learning about what happened on October 7th, what happened in the days, weeks, and months to follow. That's a serious problem. It's a serious problem for democracy, whether it's Israel or the United States, and it's a serious problem for our young people. And it was frankly shocking to me how little the students we were encountering, not only in this class we teach, which is a very large class, international relations about crisis decision making, but students more generally. And that's why I mentioned the social media piece of it, because when you would try to talk to them to engage in some kind of reasonable discussion, it was very difficult because they did not know history, they had very little context, and what they were being told on social media was not just one-sided, it was pure propaganda. And so when you think about how to tell Israel's story, and it's important, it's not just looking internally, it's looking externally, and particularly looking at young people, because, it's not just the usual suspects, it is a lot of young Jewish Americans who don't know the history and don't understand. I was talking to Condi Rice, and, she said in an interview that I did after the 20-point plan came out, she and I were on CBS, and she said, when people were chanting from the river to the sea, she would ask the students, what river, what sea? They didn't know. I had the same experience. A lot of the challenge is with younger people. More than 50% of young people in America get their news from social media. So just pause on that for a second. They are seeing short-form videos, some of them totally made up, some of them not at all representing what they claim to be showing, and that's where they get their information.
Where to even begin? Hillary Clinton, a vocal advocate of the Iraq war, is here claiming that gullible young people are taking foreign policy stances based on bogus information. Now, some might argue that if you were a US politician who voted to support the biggest Western foreign policy catastrophe of our time, which plunged Iraq into blood and chaos, as well as killing and maiming thousands of young American soldiers, you should just grovel for forgiveness before disappearing forever in disgrace, let alone stop commenting on foreign policy issues. Now, at the time, Hillary Clinton, who clearly sees herself as a towering figure when it comes to US foreign policy, was a US senator. And in her speech in support of granting authorization to President George W. Bush and his neocons to invade Iraq, she said, "I believe the facts that have brought us to this fateful vote are not in doubt." Very sure of herself at the time. She added, "It is clear, however, that if left unchecked, Saddam Hussein will continue to increase his capacity to wage biological and chemical warfare." You may recall, no weapons of mass destruction were found in Iraq after the invasion. She even said he has also given aid, comfort, and sanctuary to terrorists, including al-Qaeda members, boosting the conspiracy theory that Saddam Hussein's regime was in cahoots with al-Qaeda, which was a lie. And yet Hillary Clinton suggests that young people are being brainwashed by misinformation and disinformation on Israel and Palestine. Here is an example of a politician who is incapable of shame. And it doesn't stop there. 6 years after the invasion of Iraq, Clinton became Secretary of State under Barack Obama, She was one of the most influential advocates for the 2011 war on Libya. How did that one go, Hillary? Any updates on how it went? She talked a lot about Libya at the time. This is her when she heard the news that Colonel Gaddafi, Libya's deposed leader, had been killed.
So, I mean, that is the land of unconfirmed.
Yes, we came, we saw, he died.
Did it have anything to do with your visit?
No, oh, I'm sure it did.
Well, look, I'm not a psychiatrist, so I can't for sure diagnose her as a sociopath, but what the hell? Just to be clear, Libya collapsed into hideous bloodshed and carnage and remains 14 years after that war a failed state. It currently has two different governments vying for control. I did a search in the last few years about what Clinton has said about Libya, and do you know what I found? Almost nothing. Nada. Zero. Zilch. The last I can find is from April 2016, nearly a decade ago, when she said she had no regrets about Libya and saw it as a work in progress. Nearly 10 years after that, which itself was half a decade after the war, do you still see that catastrophe as a work in progress? And what about Afghanistan? Clinton, as Secretary of State, was firmly in the camp of supporting a surge of US troops into the country, which is what Obama's administration decided to do. According to reporting by the New York Times, she backed General Stanley McChrystal's recommendation to send 40,000 more troops into Afghanistan before endorsing a fallback proposal of 30,000. It added her unstinting support of General McChrystal's maximalist recommendation made it harder for Obama to choose a lesser option. That surge happened. What happened next? Well, there was a massive surge in US troop deaths, and there was also a massive surge in Afghan civilian deaths. And the so-called surge of troops failed in its mission. Years later, the Taliban swept through the country stronger than they'd ever been. In that administration, where she served as Secretary of State, there was a massive increase in drone strikes, which she enthusiastically supported, which are extrajudicial killings, which also killed large numbers of civilians, including an estimated 226 civilians in Pakistan alone. Clinton's State Department also approved huge arms deals for Saudi Arabia, a brutal dictatorship, and designated that a top priority, and also arms deals for other murderous dictatorships in the Middle East. Those weapons, which Clinton sold to Saudi Arabia, would go on to be used to commit heinous war crimes in Yemen. Clinton also staunchly defended Israel, which of course she was arming and supporting, as it committed multiple war crimes, not least in the 2012 onslaught on Gaza. Clinton also legitimized the right-wing coup in Honduras in 2009, and thus the regime which killed journalists, activists, and ordinary people. Now, it's notable that in Clinton's speech that she brings up as a fellow authority on the Middle East, Condoleezza Rice, who she affectionately refers to by her nickname, Condi Rice. Oh, that's cute, isn't it? Condi. Condoleezza Rice is a war criminal. She was George W. Bush's national security advisor and then Secretary of State during the so-called War on Terror, including the catastrophe that was Iraq, and we should also, of course, add Afghanistan. Now, you may listen to this and ask, how the hell does Clinton still appear in public and present herself as an authority on foreign policy while denouncing young people, indeed young Jewish Americans, as brainwashed dupes? Because of the failure of accountability, our failure to have had a reckoning about terrible crimes committed by the West, which I would just emphasize were disasters, catastrophes beyond imagination for the victims, and also caused a precipitous collapse in Western power. The idea that TikTok has been responsible for the mass shift in public opinion against Israel and the United States is a common view among Israel's cheerleaders, who are demonstrably conspiracy theorists. They think the Chinese Communist Party was brainwashing the American public against Israel using TikTok algorithms. That's their explanation for why 50% of Americans think Israel has committed genocide, compared to 35% who don't. It's also their explanation for why the polling shows that 6 in 10 Jewish Americans think Israel has committed war crimes, and 4 in 10 think it's committed genocide. Among younger Jews, 50% think Israel has committed genocide against the Palestinian people. And while 56% of Jewish Americans overall say they're emotionally attached to Israel, that falls to 36% among 18 to 34-year-olds. Hillary Clinton's contempt for Jewish Americans is actually outrageous. She thinks they don't know their own history, they're ignorant, and that's why 6 in 10 of them think Israel has committed war crimes, and 4 in 10 think Israel has committed genocide, and why those half of Jewish Americans aged 18 to 34 think it has committed genocide. Now, as one Jewish American put it in response, I find it offensive that a non-Jew asserting that young Jews like me don't know the history of our people. I know it all too well, which is why I know that never again means Gaza too. What is true is that given most of the Western media covered up Israeli war crimes, the only way people could get access to the unfiltered truth about Israeli war crimes was through social media, including TikTok. This point about propaganda. I mean, what Hillary Clinton is objecting to is younger people not being brainwashed by pro-Israel propaganda. That's her problem. That's the issue here. There is a massive propaganda machine on behalf of Israel, which includes most of the Western media, which have just regurgitated Israeli lies, airbrushed atrocities, suppressed the truth on an industrial scale. Now, as I discussed earlier this year, despite claims that the push to ban TikTok was about national security because it was Chinese owned last May, Republican Senator Mitt Romney said support for banning TikTok was down to the overwhelming volume of mentions of Palestinians on the platform. Safra Katz, a former Oriole CEO and a top executive leading the planned $14 billion takeover of TikTok's US operations, told the former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak in 2015 that they had to embed the love and respect for Israel in the American culture. Larry Ellison, Oracle's executive chairman, previously inquired about now Secretary of State Marco Rubio's loyalty to Israel before he agreed to commit $3 million for his presidential campaign in 2015 and did so when he was reassured Rubio will be a great friend to Israel. They will now have control of the TikTok algorithm. Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister who was a wanted man with an arrest warrant issued against him by the International Criminal Court for war crimes and crimes against humanity, has openly boasted about how important the TikTok sale is for Israel. She talks about the threat to democracy. The threat to democracy, she sees it, like people being able to get access to what Israel is doing to the Palestinian people online. What about the threat to democracy to an attempt to shut down an entire social media platform and then sell it off to multi-billionaires who are pro-Israel, who are committed to pro-Israel propaganda? Do you not see that as a threat to democracy, Hillary Clinton? That's the actual threat. And it's part and package of Donald Trump trying to cow the US media, adopting the Hungarian model where the Orban regime gets supportive figures to, and it has done, to buy up media organizations so that they promote pro-Orban propaganda. And that's what has been happening in the United States. Now, Hillary Clinton, yes, queen, fighting Donald Trump is justifying, essentially, is helping to legitimize the destruction of a supposedly independent media in the United States. Here's a question for Clinton. Do you think Holocaust and genocide scholars concluded that Israel is committing genocide because of TikTok? There was a consensus among those scholars that Israel is committing genocide. A resolution at the International Association of Genocide Scholars at the beginning of September concluded that genocide was being committed. The motion was passed by 86%. Let me just name some Israeli scholars alone. I'm just talking about Israeli genocide scholars here. Omar Bartov, Dean's Professor of Holocaust Studies at Brown University. Amos Goldberg, Professor of Holocaust History at the Department of Jewish History and Contemporary Jewry at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Daniel Blattman, Head of the Institute for Contemporary Jewry at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Brad Sigal, Associate Professor of Holocaust and Genocide Studies. Shmuel Liederman, Holocaust Studies at the University of Haifa. All of these have concluded that Israel is committing genocide. Does Hillary Clinton think these are all dupes who are brainwashed by disinformation and misinformation from TikTok? Scholars who dedicate their lives to the study of genocide. Who to believe here? Preeminent genocide scholars, or a two-time failed presidential candidate who voted to invade Iraq on a pack of lies and then sent American soldiers both to be killed and to kill innocent civilians in Afghanistan before the Taliban ended up taking the country more powerful than ever? The truth is, this genocide is more documented and more confessed to than any genocide as it happened in history. We have detailed reports from the United Nations, NGOs ranging from Amnesty International to Human Rights Watch to Médecins Sans Frontières. We have detailed studies from the likes of Air Wars, a NGO comprised of experts, which looked at 606 incidents of civilian harm in the first 25 days of the genocide alone, just October 2023. According to their most conservative estimates, at least 5,139 civilians were killed. In the sample of 606 attacks they analysed, they made clear this was just a fraction. They found evidence of Hamas militant casualties in just 26 of those 606 attacks. That is just over 4% of cases. The number of militants they believe were actually killed? Between 32 and 60. We also have overwhelming evidence of Israeli soldiers gleefully posting their war crimes, yes, Hillary Clinton, on TikTok, as well as an avalanche of statements of genocide and criminal intent issued by Israeli leaders and officials. See, Clinton should not simply be regarded as a political failure who handed Donald Trump power in the United States. She's a monster, blood on her hands, who was associated with some of the great foreign policy catastrophes and yet crimes of our age. The younger generation of Americans, including Jewish Americans, that she smears, are far more knowledgeable and moral than she is. And it is not hard to be more moral than Hillary Clinton, because there's no evidence of any moral compass here at all. Please like and subscribe. Help us take on the pro-genocide media as ever at patreon.com/owners84. Share the video. Always love reading your comments. Help us take on, I said, patreon.com/owners84. That's how we keep the show on the road. I'm finishing my book, The Fall of the West, which looks at some of the catastrophes that Hillary Clinton has helped inflict on the world. And then when I do that, I can do far more on the channel. But in the meantime, see you in a bit.